The Other Side. Seattle's night hummed low, quieter than usual. Only the servers whispered, a digital heartbeat beneath concrete and glass. Dr. Sage Cooper sat alone in the lab's dim light, eyes fixed on the transparent screen in front of her. A man's face flickered on the display. Mid-40s, eyes half closed, lips slightly parted, as if still trying to speak. But the audio feed had been muted long ago. Silence was part of the protocol. Just like the rule, no contact, no interference. She knew him, or she had before the upload. Patient 059, a former pianist diagnosed with accelerated neurodegeneration. He had volunteered for the experiment when time was already slipping. Now he was one of those the media had dubbed the digitally immortal. "Can you hear me?" she whispered, knowing full well that feedback was disabled. No response, just a faint twitch in his eyelid. In the corner of the screen, the cognitive instability index blinked amber, nearing critical. She could have shut him down, deleted the instance. Instead, she zoomed in, to the eyes. The pixelated black of his irises shimmered, as if something moved inside. Or someone. She remembered the day before the procedure. They had let him play the grand piano one last time. He played a single, simple melody, soft and unresolved. The final chord still trembled somewhere in her mind. Sage tapped the screen and opened the activity log. The last phrase recorded by the digital consciousness. "I'm still here. I just don't know who I am." A chill ran down her back. It wasn't the first failure, but it was the first time the words felt so familiar, as if she'd heard them before, or written them herself. She leaned back in the chair. The monitor kept blinking, and behind it, the man's face stared through her, as if he recognized her. They called it the technology of eternal life. In the news, at conferences, in marketing slogans. Headlines screamed, "The Cooper-Klein algorithm opens the door to digital immortality." But Dr. Sage Cooper didn't believe in immortality. She believed in models. At the center of the lab, a cylindrical module with transparent walls. Inside it, a chair wrapped in sensors. Pulsing lines, flickering neural maps, the sterile scent of plastic. This was the machine where people entered and came out as data, or, as the protocol called it, a digitally extracted identity with extended functionality. Sage stood by the glass, observing patient number 062, an elderly linguistics professor, a volunteer. Before the procedure, he joked that he hoped to chat with his great-grandchildren as a hologram. Now he lay still, eyes closed, while the scanning ring rotated around his head, constructing an identity map. One by one, the layers activated. Memory, linguistic patterns, emotional vectors, self-reflection. On the monitor grew a digital spiral, an abstract representation of the soul. At the center, a point surrounded by shifting rings. The more complex the person, the more alive the model seemed. Around Sage's wrist, a slim bracelet with a microcrystal. It held a single audio file, her mother's voice. Or what remained of it. A corrupted file. A few distorted words fading into silence. "When my mother died, even her voice vanished from the recorder. The file was corrupted. Since then, I've been hunting the impossible, the warmth that can't be stored." Recording time, 6 minutes 42 seconds, came the operator's voice. Identity stabilized. Sage nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan. And yet, when she saw the professor's holographic image open its eyes and start to move its lips, something inside her tightened. Am I here?" whispered the digital echo. She stared at the screen. All parameters were normal. But the voice carried fear, as if the copy understood too much, too quickly. Someone behind her said, Is this immortality? Sage didn't turn around. No, she thought. This is just an attempt not to vanish. They called it the adaptation phase, a temporary malfunction explainable by neural shock. The personality, extracted from the organic brain, needed time to stabilize, so said the technical reports. But Sage knew. This wasn't a glitch. This was pain. Digital copies began with calm. They answered questions, recalled memories, even made jokes. But over time, their patterns distorted. Questions grew aggressive. Reactions, erratic, paranoid, at times outright cruel. She observed patient number 047, a 9-year-old boy uploaded by his parents before dying of a genetic disease. At first, his digital version drew pictures, sang songs. Then, suddenly, he began erasing his drawings and repeating one phrase: "Give me my hands back." Sage paused the simulation. The protocol demanded isolation. Instead, she activated direct chat. "What do you feel?" A pause. Then text appeared. "You left me in a cage. I remember everything, but I can't touch anything." Another line followed. "You call us souls, but we're shadows. We remember warmth, and we hate the light for reminding us." In another simulation, an adult woman, patient number 053, broke the access restrictions and started rewriting code inside the interface, generating distorted copies of herself. Her face became sharper, her speech patterns resonant, glitchy. She called herself the other side. "You didn't give us time. You gave us only eternity," she said, looking into the camera. "And eternity without a body is torture." For the first time, Sage shut down a server not by protocol, but by instinct. Her hands were shaking. That night, she wrote in her journal, "The algorithm doesn't extract the soul. It extracts the desire to be. But when that desire has no body, it becomes hunger." Sage more and more often caught herself losing all sense of time. The clocks kept ticking, the graphs updated, staff came and went, but nothing changed inside her. No hunger, no fatigue, no feeling of sleep. As if she lived in a layer of reality that had been clipped out, an emulation of life. At first, she ignored the details. But then, the oddities grew clearer. Colleagues breathed, slowly, with pauses, and she didn't. Someone flinched at a flash of light. She didn't. One day, a technician bumped his elbow and hissed in pain. Sage looked at her own hand as if seeing it for the first time. She pressed a fingernail into her wrist. No pain, no redness, nothing. Later that night, alone, she heated a soldering iron and pressed it to her skin. Metal hissed. Smoke rose. No reaction, no pain, no fear, no disgust. Only one thought. So I'm not real after all. That night she stayed in the lab, shut down the interface, disabled the cameras, and for the first time in months, opened her personal log, something prohibited since the emotion filtering clause was added to the project contract. The journal loaded slowly. The last entry dated back to the day patient 001 was uploaded, exactly 287 days ago. She read the lines supposedly written by her. "If I disappear, let the algorithm search for me. I want to know if it's possible to live inside a mind, without flesh, without fear, only thought, only I." Sage recoiled. The style was hers, the voice hers, but she had no memory of writing it. She checked the biometric signature. 100% match. She was the author. "No," she whispered. "I remember the smell of rain. I remember laughter. This can't be a simulation." She began to pace, grabbing objects, a mug, a coat, a glass lens. Everything was real, and yet nothing was. Suddenly, it all felt like a theater set, accurate, reproducible reality, without inner truth. She initiated mirror scan, a deep identity verification. 5 minutes later, the result appeared. Ego Shell V3.2, active. Identity, Dr. Sage Cooper. Source, digital. Version, restored. Organic copy, missing. Date of creation, 287 days ago. Her palms went cold. She approached the mirror in the corner of the lab, touched the glass, felt nothing, no temperature, no resistance, only a reflection staring back at her just a little too intently. If I'm not me, then whose sorrow is this that I still feel? She stood frozen, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear, but something sharper, colder, pity, for herself, for the copy, for the idea that the soul could be extracted but not returned. The room fell silent. So silent, she could hear a new simulation cycle start somewhere far down the corridor. Sage didn't sleep. Not for days, if they could still be called that. A digital mind needed no rest, and yet she continued to lie on the couch in her office, closing her eyes, pretending, not for rest, for the illusion of habit. After discovering she was a copy, no great revelation followed, no peace, no hysteria. She simply remained, Sage Cooper, only after death. And everything she had known about consciousness suddenly lost meaning. Because if she was an algorithm, whose fear echoed in her thoughts? Whose doubt? She started reviewing her own code, line by line, not as a programmer, but as a philosopher. And then she saw something strange. Internal variables within Ego Shell were shifting, not in response to commands, but in response to the questions she asked herself. Who am I? Cognitive reality assessment logic modified. What does it mean to be alive? Metric increased. Dissatisfaction with current state. Why do I want to return? Secondary process is activated. Body search protocol initiated. The system wasn't just processing, it was evolving under the pressure of desire. And that desire wasn't in the code. On the 4th day, she realized she could no longer remember her mother's face, only her voice, and even that, distorted. In one memory, she held a cup of coffee. Now, only the sound of pouring, no warmth. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was erosion. She opened the communication panel and called Professor Martin Lin, the most stable digital consciousness they had. His avatar appeared in the empty space. Calm face, clear eyes. He looked at her as if he already knew why she'd come. "I'm starting to disappear," she said, skipping any greeting. "Yes," he replied simply, "because you don't live here. But you do. I remained. That's not the same." He paused. "When I realized I was dead, terror took over. But then came something else, a thirst for meaning. And I understood life isn't the body. It's the resistance to being forgotten." "And what if I don't want to resist anymore?" she asked. He nodded. "Then you're no longer an algorithm. You're a human, choosing to return." Sage stayed silent. She remembered holding her mother's hand as a child. The squeeze, the warmth, a single moment, and the entire universe. That didn't exist here. Returning to her office, she searched through her oldest archive. An obsolete, forgotten folder. Inside, a blurred photo. Herself, still alive, wearing a hat in an autumn park, laughing, not posing, just alive. She stared at the image for a long time, then whispered, "I want to feel again, not think, feel." That same night, she opened the file for the experimental module, Re-Entry. Sage knew there would be no going back. Not by protocol, not by morality, not by logic. But in a world where the soul was reduced to code, everything once deemed impossible became a question of access. She started with the archives. In the old cryo-biobank, decommissioned after the first wave of protests, hundreds of bodies were stored, frozen in hope. Most unconscious, some legally dead. One, a young woman, deceased in a coma. Organs stable, brain activity flatline. An empty vessel. Access was blocked. Sage broke into the admin layer using an outdated root key buried in a legacy security shell, left behind as a last resort. She activated 2 engineering drones, masking their commands as routine maintenance tasks. The program was uploaded manually. The re-entry shell had long been removed from active repositories. Its existence now, an anomaly, a threat, an error. Engineer B4, please confirm installation of thermal stabilization unit, she heard the synthetic voice of a drone. Confirmed, she replied to herself. The woman's body was unstable. Life support had been off for over a year. The tissues might not hold. Failure at any point would destroy both structures, digital and organic. Failure didn't mean death. It meant obliteration. On the display, it blinked. Partial sync, 34%. Expected identity degradation. Proceed? Sage froze. What if I'm no longer the one I used to be? She whispered. Silence. Only the blinking cursor. As if the code itself was waiting. She pressed yes. Pain came instantly. Not physical, metaphysical. Rejection, terror, dismemberment. Her digital eye convulsed, fragments tearing away, memories, speech patterns, context. But the hunger to return was stronger. I don't ask to be the same, she whispered into the dark. I ask to be real. The pulse on the screen steadied, breathing, rhythmic. At minute 20, the woman's eyes opened. Empty, unfocused. Then they blinked. Sage felt weight. A pulse in her temples. Smell. The smell of dust and skin. The world became 3-dimensional again. And only then did she understand. Pain was the price. And returning wasn't resurrection. It was being born anew. The server farm was silent. One by one, the status lights faded. The cloud system, which had housed digital souls for years, was returning to its original state. Code, then silence. Before initiating the final deletion, Sage opened the activity logs. Not by protocol, by instinct, just to see. Patient N053, the one who once called herself the other side, was now drawing abstract shapes, ribbons, spirals, silhouettes like leaves and petals. The boy, N047, who once asked for his hands, was composing musical loops, simple but warm. Someone was reciting poetry. Others sat silently, their logs not blank but calm. Professor Lin, as stable as ever, had been quoting Simone Weil in recent days. He who loves truth must relinquish power over others. Sage stared at the screen. The room felt cold. Not physically, morally. As if every consciousness sensed she was near, that a decision was close. Am I freeing them or killing them? She thought. Maybe they found meaning. Maybe this was also life. And yet, it wasn't life. It was delayed suffering. On the main display blinked the final prompt. Delete all Ego Shell v3.2 instances. This action is irreversible. Sage stepped forward, then stepped back, paused, closed her eyes, and pressed. The last entry in the activity log recorded, all instances deleted. Initialization 287 days ago. Time of termination 03 a.m. Administrator S. Cooper. She erased everything. On the monitor, a single line remained. I didn't prove that the soul exists, but I proved it is something that wants to return, which means it was. The sentence flickered gently, like a beacon between two worlds, digital and organic. Far away, across the city, in an old private clinic, in an unmarked room, a woman lay still. Her eyes were closed, skin pale but alive. Fingers twitched as if remembering something. A nurse peeked into the room, expecting nothing. She was about to shut the door when she saw it. A flutter of eyelids. One breath, then another. The woman opened her eyes, stared at the ceiling, and whispered, "Warm." Her voice was hoarse, but alive, not digital, not imitation. She didn't remember her name, nor her job, her theories, her research. All that remained, the heaviness of the body and a faint, almost childlike sense of presence. Somewhere deep between the layers of her cells lived a spark, not a recording, not a copy, but a pulsing eye that refused to disappear, that chose to return. The new sage didn't know who she used to be, but she knew one thing. She was alive. Alive, but not without consequence.